Sometimes the trickiest part of writing the introduction section is figuring out how to start, so I thought it might be helpful to show you how I approach it. When I'm gathering knowledge for a project, I use a summary sheet that's very similar to what we use in class. Then, when I'm ready to write, I start by taking the information from each of the summaries and putting it all into one document. So for example, if I was writing an introduction based on the articles in the list from class, I'd need to include Burton and King. So I'd copy the information from that worksheet. This is where it's nice to have the pre-formatted references or citations ready to go. So I can just come over here and grab that from my list as well. And I would do that for all of the articles that I'm working with. So to make this go quicker, I'd already compiled everything else, and we can see that list here. After that, I'll think about how I might organize the articles. So I kind of have an idea of the themes after we've read them all, and I usually just put in some headers so that I can figure out what I want to put where and reorganize it. So again, to move this along, I typed in my headers, and then I'd go through the process of copying and pasting or cutting and pasting with Control V or Control X and Control V. So to keep you from getting too seasick with me scrolling around, I already did that. And you can see how I've chunked the ideas here. You might notice that I have all of the information from all of the articles for class, which is more than you'll need. I just thought it might be good to have it all together so you can see how it might work as part of a bigger project. I included fewer required articles for your project to avoid stressing you out too much though. So as you're looking at this, you might notice, among other things, that I split the work from Campisi into two ideas. I could see those two ideas fitting in different places and thought that it would be good to separate them out right away. I also didn't have all of the articles fit into these categories, so I ended up with a section that I called Not Helpful after thinking about the ideas of strategies that weren't alcohol or weren't drugs but might not be helpful. And that not helpful heading might confuse me later, but for now I'll remember what it means. And then there's some that I don't exactly know where they fit right now, so I just have those under a question mark heading. So I have it all organized roughly. And now I start to think about within those sections how I would organize it. I want to show you how I do that and how I go about organizing to create a paragraph. And I'll mention the introduction paragraph shortly, but I'm not going to start with that. The options we'll have for the introduction paragraph are more limited, and I'm afraid it'd be too tempting to try to just reword what I have here if I show you a model. And sometimes I actually do start writing in the middle of a paper. I tried sequencing it that way for this class a while back, but it made it too confusing. For now though, if you find that you're having a hard time thinking about putting it together in the big picture, you might look ahead to the next step of writing your literature review. So that said, in this case, our social support section has the most information. So I'm going to show you what I would do in terms of reorganizing it and then talk you through how I would write that. I'm not going to talk while I do that, so you can just watch as I do that real quick. Okay, so you can see I kind of have two chunks here, and I'd begin writing, and it may be that I use this as a transition because or transition paragraph, so to speak, because we have some pieces about beneficial coping mechanisms like physical activity. We have some pieces, if we were to use everything together, that are about non-beneficial activities like drinking. Social support brings it together. We can talk about one thing that can be both beneficial or not. So the Van Kim and Nelson article could be used as a transition to go from physical activity to helping stress levels. Then I could go on to say that social support is in generally an effective way to decrease stress. And one way that it helps, and one way we see evidence of that, is because we are less likely to get sick or succumb to sickness when we have more social support. When we look at that in electronic formats, the social network size and the amount of Facebook use and how we associate stress with Facebook might contribute to that, which suggests that Facebook may not have the same benefits as in-person social interactions. In other words, social support can help reduce stress, but some forms of social interaction might increase it. And computer-based social interactions seem to be the ones that are associated with that. So I go through and iron that out and make it a little bit less redundant, but hopefully you get the idea there. So when I think about it that way, I get a little different perspective on the ideas I had in the not helpful and the question mark sections, and that helps me think about a few big ideas for the intro paragraph. Here's what that rough outline would look like. I'd start with that idea of college students having sources of stressors, and I could support that with the Hearst article. But if you didn't read the Hearst article, you don't need that. And we could also just start with the idea that one reason that stress is a concern for researchers is because it seems to be related to our happiness. And one way researchers have gone about looking at that is thinking about how we could reduce stress. And they found that some simple things like writing about positive experiences might be able to reduce stress. On the flip side, things like being able to sit up straight, something that seems relatively simple and maybe unrelated, could actually also reduce stress. And on the other side, some things not so helpful. We call that dysfunctional coping. So then I would have a sentence that talks about how researchers have looked at that from a number of perspectives to find additional evidence. So I'm hoping just hearing me talk through it, and I'll admit this is definitely roughly talking through it, gives you a sense of how to put it together. And the main thing is somewhere to start. I always go through multiple drafts, and the idea of this project and this assignment is that you will too.